GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. We are going to move into a very exciting part of the show. We are switching from PPR rankings from ESPN to IDP rankings for those who play individual defensive player fantasy football. This should be very exciting for you. We are going to start off with the D-Linemen in terms of rankings. Obviously, the big boys up front, they're going to be your point getters if you should decide to play IDP this season. I think that this is a very reflective list of very talented D-Linemen, both at end and in the middle of the front. So it should be very exciting to see. I think I'm going to start from number 1 this time, as I don't have a graphic for this one. So, starting off at number 1, probably still one of the more underrated D-linemen. I know it's weird to say underrated when I'm mentioning this guy, because I think of him as one of the best D-linemen in the league. But we are going to start off at number 1 with Max Crosby of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I think that Max Crosby last year had one of his best seasons ever. 14.5 sacks, 5.5 solo tackles. Now, the Las Vegas Raiders in a transitional period where Antonio Pierce comes in as the head coach, wants a more hard-nosed philosophy. I think that by adding Christian Wilkins to complement Max Crosby's stats will only be more elevated, and I think Antonio Pierce is just the right head coach to do that. Max Crosby has been a huge vocal supporter of Antonio Pierce, so look for Max Crosby to have a really special year again this year. Mainly due to the fact that he now has a coach who trusts him to be one of the leaders of this defense. Obviously, Antonio Pierce has said that he wants to build around several other younger players like Robert Spillane, the middle linebacker. But ultimately, when you think of the Las Vegas Raiders defense, it starts and ends with Max Crosby. Now that he has a partner that he can rely on in Wilkins from the Miami Dolphins, I think that Max Crosby is finally going to be recognized as the number 1 D lineman in the league. Deservedly so. And number 2, this guy's not bad either. TJ Watt. 19 sacks last year, 48 solo tackles. I think that TJ Watt is the perfect example of someone who marries one level of the defense to another. I think without a player like TJ Watt, the Steelers' secondary will not be as storied as it has been in the past couple of years. I think that TJ Watt just knows how to complement every player in the defense. He knows how to bring the Steelers' defense together. Obviously, they rely on them a lot because of the fact that the Steelers' offense has not been performing these past couple of seasons. So TJ Watt at number 2 is fine with me because of the fact that he is one of those players who just knows how to bring a position group together. Look for him to be a high-value asset in an IDP league. Coming in at number 3, another player who I think can also say this. We can also say the same about Micah Parsons. 14 sacks last year, 36 solo tackles. Obviously not as much production as some of these other guys, but he is listed as a linebacker, so just showing off how versatile he can be. The fact that we can even mention him as a D lineman, the fact that he just shifts around so much in that Dallas Cowboys defense. Obviously, what with the loss of Leighton Vander Esch, I think that Micah Parsons is just going to be a huge asset for IDP, especially if you consider him a D lineman, because of the fact that his versatility shows through. And I just respect him as a player who can fit anywhere on the defensive front at any time of asking. At the number 4 spot, a guy who I think will have another big season due to a coaching change in Khalil Mack of the Los Angeles Chargers. Obviously, the big question about the Chargers defense was, why has it been underperforming under Brandon Staley? And I think that problem has been solved. Brandon Staley now gone. In comes Jim Harbaugh. Does that immediately fix the defense? No, but Khalil Mack doesn't need fixing. He had 17 sacks last year, 57 solo tackles, so he's not the problem. It's just the fact that I want to see this Los Angeles Chargers defense take that next step up, and Khalil Mack will be a huge part of that, along with Joey Bosa and a young secondary led by Asante Samuel. I'm really excited to see how the Chargers defense handles the coaching change, and I think you have two main guys who can get the job done for you any given time. So Khalil Mack, very well deserving of that number 4 spot. At number 5, we have Josh Allen, not of the Buffalo Bills, but of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He had 17.5 sacks last year, 43 solo, 2 forced fumbles as a D-Lineman. An incredible season for him last year. In a Jacksonville Jaguars defense that really is very interesting, starting to take shape a little bit, obviously. Trayvon Walker, the first overall pick a couple of years back, finally getting incorporated into the team. They signed Eric Armstead from the San Francisco 49ers. So they're trying to piece together a nice little defensive front here. But in my mind, it all starts and ends with Josh Allen as the catalyst of this defense. Obviously, the Jacksonville Jaguars are not known for their defensive front as much. They're more known for their secondary. So I think that Josh Allen will have a big year again. His stats will be elevated as the main guy in that D front for Jacksonville. Coming in at number 6, a guy who has a change of scenery, a very nice player who my dad will be very mad is gone from his favorite team, that is Danielle Hunter, moving from the Minnesota Vikings to the Houston Texans last year. 16.5 sacks, 54 solo tackles. I think this is a huge signing for the Houston Texans because of the fact that they're building a nice little D front. DeMeco Ryans, a young head coach wanting to build to the defense as well. Obviously, he has his offense set as much as he's concerned with CJ Stroud at the QB position and a high-powered offensive attack. And moving to the defense, DeMeco Ryans also wants to build that. And by signing Danielle Hunter, he's proving that the Texans defense could be a defense to look out for. Pairing him with Will Anderson Jr. in his second year, I think that is going to be very exciting. Obviously, their secondary also young and hungry as well. So look out for the Texans defense, but especially Danielle Hunter coming in from Minnesota, paired with Will Anderson to wreak havoc in the AFC South. Moving on to number 7, a guy who is starting to be the face of the Detroit Lions, one of my favorite defensive players, mainly due to the fact that he decided to stay in his hometown. Aiden Hutchinson, what a guy. 36 solo tackles, 11.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles last year. I just love Aiden Hutchinson, man. Just the face of that Detroit Lions defense, such a likable presence up front. And in terms of defensive prowess, the Detroit Lions are one of those up and down defenses. They want to focus on the secondary. I think they're starting to get the pieces up front with John Kaminsky, Aiden Hutchinson, Alex Anzalone at the linebacker spot. So they're starting to round into form a little bit. But ultimately, I just want to see how Dan Campbell focuses on the defense. Obviously, we saw with the offense, he's willing to take a lot of risks. I want him to see how he progresses with the defense as well, and Aiden Hutchinson is the perfect face for that movement. At number 8, a little bit low for Myles Garrett, but for someone who has been such a fantastic defensive player for the past couple of seasons, he can rank anywhere in the top 10 and people wouldn't be mad. 33 solo tackles last year, 14 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles. It's a force of nature, and really the catalyst for the Browns defense for being as good as it was last year, obviously trying to compete with the AFC North. Obviously, down went Deshaun Watson, and their offense was in disarray, and the defense really kept them afloat by being the number 1 defense in the league. Myles Garrett finally got that running partner last year in Zadarius Smith. So I just think that Myles Garrett is always going to be a top 10 D lineman in the league, no matter who he's playing with, just because of his willingness to perform. And look for the Browns to be one of the best defenses in the league yet again, with Jim Schwartz leading them. At number 9, an interesting player, mainly due to the fact that one of his running mates last year left him, and Derek Brown. He had 57 solo tackles, only 2 sacks though. Now for the Carolina Panthers, obviously they don't really have that many big names either on the offense or the defense, except for Derrick Brown. He needs to be the face of that Carolina Panthers defense, and that is enough said. 2 sacks is not enough, but it could be due to the fact that this next guy I'm going to mention left him, and I think that production will go up. I think that since Carolina is going to be below average yet again this year, Derrick Brown's stats could be elevated. But moving on to the guy who left him, rounding out our top 10, Brian Burns, moving from Carolina to New York. And honestly, the New York Giants defense is rounding into shape. They have the front up front and Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau. Now they add Brian Burns and his 32 solo tackles and 8 sacks from last year. I really like this addition for New York. It goes to show that they want to build through the defensive front. Brian Daboll wants to adapt a more defensive philosophy because of the fact that there are so many question marks surrounding the offense. But Brian Burns, look for him to be a huge value asset for an IDP league. I really like this top 10, but that'll just about do it for this segment. I really enjoyed ranking these D-linemen with you guys, but coming up next, we move from D-linemen to the second level of the defense, the linebackers, coming up next on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast.